See, we are live, and the broadcasting is doing it again. I keep hitting yes, and it goes right back to no. So something's wrong.
All right.
But
Well,
anyway, we
uh,
got cut off somehow, some technical difficulties, and so we're back to continue part uh part two of part one. And we're going to pick right back up, starting with it seems it cut off right after I spoke last. So we're going to have Brother Wudjau repeat what he said, and then we'll continue on from there.
okay. So to kind of rewind a bit, and I believe I was cut off from when I started speaking. I was just adding to the commentary given by Asar about what Dr. Beatty is confusing on the topic of Coptic. And so what I was saying is that when it comes to decipherment, just for those who may or may not know, we wrote an entire book about the decipherment process, answering the question or rebuttaling the question that the fact that the Egyptian hieroglyphic writing system has not been deciphered, which was a claim made by Professor Walter Williams. We wrote a book addressing all of his claims and also educating everyone on the process and how it works and what a writing system is and all that it entails. So for the details, definitely seek out that book. All right. But in gist, what I want to say is that the decipherment, when you're deciphering, what you're doing is you are ascertaining the mapping of what is spoken and how it is mapped to what is written. And so we always have to remember that a writing system is the visual representation of speech. And so how speech is mapped to what we see, what we call graphs, and we call graphemes and graphs, how these phonemes and phones are mapped to graphs and graphemes is what decipherment is trying to answer and to ascertain. Okay. And so Coptic was instrumental in that process. But the language and the writing system have been deciphered already. And so so this is not an issue of decipherment, which is what Dr. Beatty is implying in his commentary. So again, he's off topic. He's off topic again, not understanding the issues. And just real quick, I'm hearing some. Okay, so I just want to clarify for people who may not have that understanding that we're not talking about decipherment. Okay, and another thing about Coptic, which everyone should realize, is that um, the Coptic writing system. Now, mind you, we have the language of Coptic and the writing system of Coptic. Both of those share names, so people may get confused. All right. So we have the language of Coptic and then the writing system of Coptic. The Coptic writing system, it actually consists of mostly Greek letters, with the exception of 7. All right. So it utilized the Greek letters or its writing system to write the spoken Coptic language. And so in doing that, what the people did is that they gained the documentation of vowels, but they lost the documentation of the classifiers, um, aka determinatives. So the Coptic writing system has removed the determinatives but added the vowels. Okay, and hopefully people will follow that. And again, like I said, if you want details, seek out that publication on that. And so the importance of vowels, and let me just share this quickly. Um, Give me a moment. I want to show the importance of um, hmm, I want to show the importance of the determinatives. And let me share this with you all. This is a very, very, very brief lesson on determinatives, but it's necessary. All right. And I want to share this. And let me share it on my screen. Okay. So here's a very, very brief lesson. And I'm only going through this to show you the importance of determinatives. All right. And matter of fact, again, this is included in the collection of essays that was written for the ASCAC conference that just passed. So this information is included in there. But I just want to briefly share this as far as what I'm showing. So let's just take this last table here of these 4 words. So here's an example of 4 words using these 2 signs. We have a hare or rabbit, and we have a water ripple underneath of it. These 2 glyphs are transliterated as WN, and the conventional pronunciation of this word is when. All right. Now that's not meant to be historically accurately as if to say that that's how the ancient Egyptians pronounced this word, but this is a convention that we use today. So the word when. Now on its own, it means to exist as a verb. But now we have 4 words here that utilizes the same set of glyphs, these 2 glyphs, the rabbit and the water ripple. All right. Now, the only exception about these 4 words is that they have an extra glyph at the end of each of these words. And these extra glyphs at the end are determinatives. And the reason why they're called determinatives is because they help determine the meaning of the word. So all 4 of these words, if these determinatives were removed and you looked at these words, they would look identical. And they're transliterated identically. WN, 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 WN. Without the determinative, you will not know which word is used. So because this determinative is a door laying on its side, this particular word means to open. When, open. This word here is determined by legs in motion, and it has to do with anything that is movement. So this word when means to hurry. This particular word when has a diminished bird, has a spiral bird, which is a classifier for things that are diminished, small, or at fault. And so the word when here means to be at fault, to be blamed, to be responsible for something. The last word when has a hair determinative of hair. Because it has hair, this particular word means to strip off, to remove, to strip off, to clean off, wipe off. Okay, so these are 4 completely different words, and the only reason why we know that visually is because of these determinatives. And so what Coptic does, it adds vowels in here, but it removes the determinatives in the writing system. Okay, so I want to be clear and let everyone understand the pros and cons of Coptic. So don't allow somebody to toss around the word Coptic as if that means something other than what it really means. All right, because we're not talking about decipherment. And the downside or the con of dealing with Coptic as a handicap, and this is something that's understood by those who actually deal with the languages and so on and so forth, is that you're handicapped with the Coptic writing system because it is absent of the vowel. Absent of the determinatives. All right, just like the handicap of the Seshmetu Necher or the hieroglyphs, the handicap there is that it's absent of the vowels. So it's not something to say it's good or evil. It's just a handicap that we have to acknowledge as scientists and as scholars. We acknowledge these handicaps. All right. So with that, let me switch back over. You had any commentary?
I'm gonna see if I can pull up something real quick. Give me a second. Matter of fact, just start, and I'm gonna come back because I gotta add this in real quick. And so we'll just be revisiting what you just said briefly. It won't take long, but I want to have a visual citation for the group.
All right, so I'm gonna continue to let the video play, and again, our previous video was cut off, and hopefully everyone is picked back up where we left off. All right, and again, we will be entertaining a few questions after we're done, and we don't have that long to go because we're gonna make sure these are bite-sized, manageable videos. So here we go.
Y'all.
And the correct method is actually
a free translation. Tepesem means atop the county. How do we know that? Through Coptic. So, as a result, every time you bypass Coptic, you are implicitly saying that meta-nature has not been deciphered.
Okay, so here again, now I paused the video kind of prematurely because that's where Dr. Beatty actually explicitly makes that statement. And again, Dr. Beatty is talking apples and oranges. And so we're not talking about decipherment. We already are aware, fully aware of the writing system of the glyphs themselves, the formal glyphs, be it in simplified format or in the formal monumental format. So the question and the issue is not decipherment. This is not an issue of decipherment. Okay. And so this speaks to what we were saying in the beginning of the handicaps of having a pseudo debate. Because one, I already mentioned, the problems with that, but to add to that is that you can give the audience an impression that you are refuting an argument, but you're really not, because you're completely off topic. And then when the original claimant comes back and ignores it, the audience may take that the fact that you're ignoring it as if you can't address it. And so this is why debates are confusing to a lot of audiences that walk away. And so our job is to edify people, to educate people, so we walk away in a progressive forward movement on different issues, and not just talk for talking's sake, not just talk just because we want to argue for argument's sake, not just to make up anything out the clear blue sky just to sound good. Okay, so this is the difference, and this is what we're bringing to the table, which is why we documented the essays in the first place, so people can have something to walk away with. And so now it's available. Again, I want to make sure everyone understands that. So Asar, were you
Yeah, so this speaks to the previous slide, and it also speaks to this one. And so again, Dr. Beatty is a philologist, meaning that he's more so textual criticism. That's his strength. So when Dr. Beatty is king in being able to go into text and read text. However, linguistics is outside of philology. Ultimately, they are relatable, but they're not the same. And he keeps getting this mixed up, thinking that just because you can read Egyptian text, that somehow this gives you clues into, without studying the field, into linguistics, and you can answer linguistic questions. And that is not the case. So when he talks about, for example, like I'll compare Middle Egyptian, Chiluba, Collagen, and let's say Sumerian, right? And he says bypassing Coptic. It's not that I have to bypass Coptic. We already gave the limitations of Coptic. But this particular citation goes into exactly why I do what I do, because this is standard method in linguistics. So this citation that you see up here, and am I being shown on the screen?
Yes.
That you can see? Okay. So this is from a text, an article by Dr. Alan R. Bumhard. He's a linguist who specializes in Indo-European specifically, and he's also a Nostradus. And so he's one of the few linguists that publishes in regards to the Nostratic theory of some super phylum, which includes, Proto-Indo-European, Afro-Asiatic, some Uralic languages, and things of that nature. So anyway, so this text is called The Importance of Hittite and the other Anatolian daughter languages for the reconstruction of the Proto-Indo-European phonological system. So keep in mind that Hittite is not a living language. We only know about Hittite through writing. And so peep the title of this, The Importance of Hittite and the Other Anatolian Daughter Languages for the Reconstruction of the Proto-Indo-European Phonological System. So this is a dead language that is used in Indo-European for the reconstructions without a quote-unquote internal reconstruction of the phonological system in Hittite first. And so, again, I have sources upon sources, but we can show you these things. So he starts off here on page 2. One of the most important axioms, you know, the proposition and values of the comparative method is that the oldest attested and highest quality data should play a pivotal role in the reconstruction of proto-languages. There's a reason why I have that in red. One of the most important axioms of the comparative method is that the oldest attested data should play a pivotal role in the reconstruction of proto-languages. So Coptic is not the oldest attested language coming out of ancient Kemet. So as they argue, it is the latest. And so the most valuable is the oldest, which is why we go to the Middle Egyptian, because this is when the word Kemet is being used for the first time as a national designation. Prior to that, the Kemet that you see in the pyramid texts and things of this nature has nothing to do with the nation as a whole. And this is something that Dr. Beatty doesn't know, that Reggie was informed of, but he seems not to know. And so I'm going to, repeat this again. So this is from the dictionary, the Ham-Waterbush Egyptisch Dush, came out in 1995. There's been some subsequent additions, saying to this and forms. And so this is Dr. Rainer Hanning. And so this is one of the many German dictionaries. And so when you see the word Km.t here, because I don't know if we got to that point yet, and we probably haven't, where he mentions that in order for there to be a Km.t, there has to be a Kemet. And so, as is evidence here in the dictionary here, that Kemet.t refers to the people from Athribis. It is not Egypt. And so that is a misreading from Diop, which is why we go to the oldest stuff and not the latest stuff. And so this was discussed by Jean Leclerc in his article on Pepi the First Pyramid, where you see that word Kemet. And so here's the note from his article. This is 1978. And here is the French. And here's my translation here. So it says, we have for a long time interpreted Kemet.t as Egyptians. An interpretation in an essay by Otto was presented in Betrag zur Geschichte. I can never pronounce German correctly, but here's the text. In Egyptian, Faulkner, Ancient Egyptian Pyramid Text, page 288 and 327, assumed that it was the people of Athribis. The presence of the bull and palimpsest in our new text of Pepi the First confirms this hypothesis. So Faulkner already argued that Kemet.t refers to those of Athribis. And so he's saying, because this whole text that this one footnote S is discussing, it is discussing the whole pyramid of Pepi the First. And we're going to hear Dr. Mario Beatty try to address this text. Dr. Beatty is not up on the latest scholarship regarding this. So he's holding an old, outdated paradigm that is present in the Wudjau that the other Egyptologists have already corrected. And so when you see Km.t, it has nothing to do with the nation. It has to do with this gnome called Ethribis, which the full name is Kemet. And so let me see if we can go back to that. So, for example, this is from a text written in French on Ethribis, and it has basically all of the forms of the word Ethribis, especially the forms like Kemet, discussing this gnome. And so, you know, here's an example here, and I was saving this for something else that Dr. Beatty is going to say, because he's going to talk about this word Kemet written with the Horus on the standard as a determinative, you know, and so talking about, you know, saying in this old place, but this is standard when it's talking about Ethribis, because the determinative here has to deal with Osiris or any of these other deities which were associated with bulls and cattle in the Delta region. And so we discussed this in the text because we just didn't last minute decide that we're going to, you know, come to a conclusion and then have a debate and then change our stance, you know, every other week, because we're just trying to find arguments against Brother Asar, Brother Wudjau, and Brother Sonjedi. And so, you know, we've been studying this for a while. And so, you know, here's this one text here coming from Ethribis. It's from the papyrus, Cairo, the Cairo papyrus, which he's citing here. And so here's the French. You can pause the video when you revisit. And this is my translation. And so it says, the composition titled Introduction of the Festivals of All the Gods enumerates the celebratory festivals during the first 17 days of the first month of the flood season. So when we go back, you see he's citing two Egyptian texts here, or different sections here. And so that's what we're getting into now. So it says the first month of the flood, 12 days, favorable. Feast of Km.t, Feast of Satis in Elephantine, Feast of Nefertum, Master of Food, do not eat any meat. So during this festival, you were not to eat any meat. The first month of the flood, on the 13th day, favorable, the festival of Nut, the Feast of Km.t, Master of Ethribis, the feet of Horus, Master of Mendes, the festival of Noon, do not eat a mouse. So on this day, on the 13th day, you're not supposed to eat a mouse during this festival. And so that word Ethribis that he's talking about here is this word Kemet. So when you see Kemet in the old, in like the old kingdom, it is a short form of a fuller word, which is Kemet, which is dealing with Ethribis. And so you see, I just made the glyphs bigger from this phrase right here that you see here. So we see that it's bigger here. So he's talking about Km.t, you know, it's a gnome here, and you can see the falcon on the standard as the determinative for this place, because it has to deal with Osiris, Neb, Lord of Kemet. And so you see the bull, and then the falcon, you know, on the standard here. But this is Kemet, but this is not the nation Kemet. This is Ethribis. And so again, this whole text that we're citing from is all on the gnome of Ethribis. So it's citing nothing but primary text. It's giving you the various forms of the word. Sometimes it'll be written with the Kem glyph. Sometimes it'll be written simply with the bull glyph. Sometimes it'll be fully written out as Kemet. Sometimes it'll just be written as Kim. We all refer to Athribis, not the nation of Kemet. Two totally different words and names. And so you'll see this form here in Budge's Book of the Dead. It'll say Kemet, Egypt, but this is incorrect. This is Kemet Athribis. And we know this because of the Netcher determinative. This is another variation of the word Kemet dealing with Athribis. And so they have a whole section on here on the versions of Kemet Weret in the various books of the dead, which we know is an extension of the what? Pyramid text and coffin text. So it's a continuity we see. And from the pyramid text to the coffin text to the Book of the Dead, all the Kemets that you see in those are referencing Kemet Weret. And so again, Dr. Beatty just isn't up on the latest scholarship, and for whatever reason, but this is, when you're off topic, you throw all kinds of stuff in the air and hoping something sticks, and not doing one's due diligence. And that's exactly what happened here. So I'm moving on to you.
Okay. That's good. I would like to add a little bit to that real quick and just make, and this, because I always keep the people listening in mind. And so Athribis, when we say Athribis, we have to understand that is the Greek transcription of what was prior in Coptic as Ithribi. Now, Ithribi in Coptic is coming from the older languages of this area, from a temple complex called Hut Iri-Ib. So the word Hut Iri-Ib, as a matter of fact, let me just share my screen real quick, giving you all a little teaser on what you can find in our essays. So this here, if I have highlighted on my screens, you can see it. Hut Iri-Ib is the actual name of the temple complex. And we have to understand that in modern times, we do this to this very day. So for example, we have the state of New York, but then we have a city of New York. So we have New York, New York. And so what happens in the naming conventions of these toponyms and things, especially if they're exonymic toponyms, meaning that they're labeled and named by foreigners, they will tend to do this kind of thing and call a place by their preference or their prerogative naming convention. So an example is the word Egypt itself. It is said that it comes from the Greek word Egyptos, which was, as they say, comes from the temple complex of Hut-Ka-Ptah. So we have Hut Iri-Ib that becomes Ithribi. And if you look at it, you can kind of see where Hut, like you have Hathor or Nephthys, Nebet Hut. That combination will produce these different sounds in the Greek. So we have Athribis or Ithribi coming from Hut Iri-Ib, which is a temple complex in a certain area in the Delta. Now, that temple complex was within a more bigger demarcated area of the nome, and it was the nome itself was called Kemet Weret. And so Hut Iri-Ib was within the nome of Kemet Weret, which is the 10th nome, became the 10th nome later, the 10th nome of Lower Egypt. And so when you do the research, when you actually go and do your research on Athribis, you'll find out that there were many Athribis. And so some people are under the impression that Athribis came later, but it did not. Athribis or Kemet Weret was known from early dynastic periods. This is why it shows up in the pyramid text. So, for example, as you see on the screen, I have here, we draw further attention to the last example above, Kemet, which is a short form of Kemet Weret or Kemwer. And these are all the citations and sources, which is the 10th nome of Lower Egypt. This area is also known as Athribis from the Greek, or Coptic Ithribi, so named from its temple complex Hut Iri-Ib, and there's the sources for that. In the pyramid text of Neith, pyramid text 674, we read, and I'm just going to read the English. The mourners will call you as a set. The jubiler will cheer you as Nebuchadnezzar. And for those who don't know, Nebuchadnezzar and Aset are the personification or the deification of mourning. Those are the two sisters that mourned the death of Osir. Okay. And so they became the archetype of mourners at funerals. So when women are dressed in white and mourning for their loved ones, or paid professional mourners, they are emulating this principle of Aset and Nebuchadnezzar. So the mourner and the jubiler together. So just give you a little bit of FYI. And so the next line reads, you will stand before the shrines as men, and you will stand before those of Athribis. Notice that this word here is Km.t. It is the place called Athribis as Apis or Hapu. We say Apis, but the in the text is Hapu. All right, Hapu. Now, if you do the research about Hapu, you'll find that Hapu was a prominent deity within Hut Herdi Ib, the 10th nome, called Kemet. Okay, so you know, and it goes on to say, you will stand in the wide lake as Sokar. Okay, so now we were actually I was saving this for part 2 because Beatty's gonna bring it up later, but we probably go over this again because Dr. Beatty is going to contradict himself later on, and we're going to point that out when he does it about this particular thing. So keep this in mind for when we do part 2. This commit to you, and because he's going to give Alan's translation of what I'm showing you on the screen, and he's going to agree with Alan's translation that Kemet to you means the inhabitants of Kemet. But this particular Kemet is not Kemet the nation. It's Kemet, which is a short form of Kemet Weret. Okay, so real quickly here, it says, in this passage, the demonym, Kemet to you, refers to inhabitants of Athribis. So we have a Faulkner and Hanig, which is what Asar just showed, not to be mistaken for the entire kingdom of Kemet, which was known after the 11th dynasty. And we will tell everyone why, but that's a separate discussion. But we will discuss why. Now, later in Edfu, which is a Ptolemaic era of time, in the temple of Heru in Edfu, there are references to the inhabitants of Kemet by the demonym Kemetiu as well, but we have a different form of it. It's spelled a little different in the glyphs. And here is the citation for it, and so on and so forth. So I just wanted to kind of add on to what you were building, and we probably had to bring this up in our part 2 to go over that. All right, so now we could kind of pick up where we left off on the video. And because we had this interruptions, maybe it's a good idea. I'm gonna play it a little while, but we may want to I guess kind of just let it all play and stop it and then just kind of give commentary. So we'll see. We've got 4 minutes left, so I'm gonna let it play.
Okay. All right.
In your methods. Because when you make translations of any text, ask yourself, how is it that we get Kanu means residence? How do we get to that? Are we guessing? Or is there a long historical evolution that ends in Coptic? And so this is what's at stake. So I'm giving this example up here from Jaroslav Cherny's Coptic Etymological Dictionary. This is the English version. I'll come to Ogden Goulet's article in a minute. But Ogden, in his piece, he gives the French version of Werner Bissichel, Dictionnaire étymologique de la langue copte. But in both languages, when you see, I don't have my clicker up here, but when you see Timon become black, Kame, black, and you see it in Determinatives there, and then it has Kemet, black land, Egypt. That means, and then of course, in the Verjabu that you like to cite, the earliest reference to Kim that the Verjabu gives is from the 2nd dynasty, where the determinative on Kim is the horse, falcon on the standards. And how does he translate it? The black horse in the Verjabu. So from the earliest attestation, from the 2nd dynasty onward, we actually see Kim meaning black. So you ask, the question is, how do we get to this? That is, that Kim as a root has a long evolution inside the Kemetic language. Next.
All right, I do have to point out here that, again, Dr. Beatty is of the assumption, and as he started out, remember, we have to understand where people's mind, where they stand within their own minds. Dr. Beatty has himself placed us in the category of the scholar Abdallah from Sudan, as we talked about earlier, as the protagonist to Sheikh Anta Diop and Theophile Obenga at the symposium. So because he styled us in that category, he feels, as confirmed by what he's saying, that we somehow don't believe that there's a word Kim in the language that means black, because everything he just said here is in reference to that. But that's not our argument. Again, that's not at dispute. So again, because this is not a formal debate, these are the kind of things that hinder real informative progress in these kinds of discussions. So I want to just reiterate that. And based on his logic, I have to point this out. Based on his logic, all we have to use is the Coptic dictionary. Because if you listen to his logic, that there's a long historical evolution of the language that ends in Coptic, and that's his words, that ends in Coptic. And he even emphasized that by saying, how do we know that Asar Imhotep means Asar comes in peace? Because Asar in Coptic is Usir, and E has a long history also in Coptic that means to come, and then Hotep is also in Coptic means peace and stuff. So he's essentially telling or arguing or implying that really all we need to look at is the Coptic dictionaries, and anybody will tell you that is a flawed method, and he has the wherewithal or audacity to say that method is Dr. Theophile Obenga's method, and that method being Dr. Theophile Obenga's method is the correct method. If y'all remember, he hit his hand on the podium and said that is the correct method. And so that's very problematic to say those things and to actually put that on Dr. Theophile Obenga. We have to give Obenga much more credit than that, than what he's given. So I just want to point those things out, and we can kind of tease that out more in our next video. But let's just continue. We got too long. You had something to say to that part before?
No, I mean it was a prelude. So if you heard at the end of it, he was talking about the Wartabush saying that this is a quote unquote Black Horus, that it's a Kim with a determinative of the falcon. So we already know if it's a determinative, it is not part of the graphing. He's not describing the determinative. That's agrammatical. And so it is referring to a place. So I just showed from the data that this is a common practice when referring to Ethribis or any of the locations that focuses on a particular deity. Because they do the same thing with Kansu, with I forgot who else. There's a few others that are in that area that are associated with the bull. And so any domain that is associated with the particular bull, which is associated with water, that's another topic. You'll see the determinative of the various netra determinatives, especially the falcon on the standard, or the seated man with the seated bearded man glyph. Both of them are articulated as netra in the language. And so, again, he's just not up on the scholarship. And so, again, we, in our text, a contribution to the debate on the meaning of the place name Kemet, which was just released Friday. We have all the citations, all of this, because we anticipated this. And in discussions like this, when you don't have text, people can say what they want to say and be all over the place, like our good brother Reggie and our good brother Dr. Beatty, you know, because they don't want to deal with the topic. So we're keeping the discussion focused on the topic at hand. And so it's not a coincidence when we talk about the meaning of the place name Kemet, because that's all we've ever been debating. And anything else is a totally different conversation. And that's what Dr. Beatty, as a matter of fact, the reason why you're getting all this confusion from Dr. Beatty is because he's trying to have two different debates at the same time. He's trying to continue a discussion that we had at the last ASCAC conference concerning a theory developed by our good brother Jean-Claude Mboli in his 2010 text, which argues that the Coptic language is a separate language from a separate branch of Negro Egyptian than Middle Egyptian, going against the convention that Coptic is the last stage of a continuum starting from the Old Kingdom writing, as evidence from the Old Kingdom writing. So again, he still hasn't to this date read the book, and he still hasn't to this date learned anything about linguistics. And so he's still trying to make arguments that he was making a year ago from text that he never read and understood in the first place. So he's trying to mix that argument. That's why you keep hearing the Coptic stuff, because Coptic has nothing to do with the meaning of the place name Kemet. It's irrelevant, because as already cited from, you know, the standard practice is the axiom in historical comparative linguistics is that you look for the oldest, not the latest, because the oldest is what's going to give you the richer forms, the original forms, and especially with all the grammatical morphemes, if it is an agglutinative language, for example, attached to the terms. So that's what we find in the Old and Middle Kingdom that you don't find at all in Coptic.
I'd like to add something real quick.
Go ahead.
Let's say that we adopt that logic. There is no Coptic dictionary in existence that says the place name Kemet means black people. Let me repeat that. There is no Coptic dictionary in existence that says the place name Kemet means black people. All right, let that marinate for a minute. All right, so we finished. Come on, I'm hit play.
What'd you say?
No, I said if you were finished, I'm gonna hit play and let the rest play out, and then we can.
Yeah, I'm done. Okay,
but I hope everybody got what I just said.
But to add on to that, I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Theophile Obenga never, ever squared, multiplied by 2, carry to 1, ever defends Diop's argument that Kemet means black people. Ever. You can't find a citation, because Obenga knows that Diop is wrong. He just didn't say nothing in the Cairo Symposium. Matter of fact, when Diop was corrected by Serge Sonneron, Diop switched the subjects and tried to address Abdallah in his argument, instead of dealing with the fact that Diop was wrong on this. But Diop was an elder. He was senior to Obenga. So it is African tradition not to argue, you know, especially if y'all coming up there to argue together, to argue that point. So he had to let that die down. And I'm talking about Dr. Obenga had to let that die down, because Dr. Obenga, actually dealing with the linguistics a little bit more than Diop, knew for a fact that this was grammatically wrong. And matter of fact, as you stated, Mario Beatty also confirms that. So in this lecture. And so there's a reason why you never see any dictionary arguing that, but that's neither here nor there. But what's telling is the lack of support coming from Obenga on Diop on this notion that Kemet means black people. You will not find a citation of Obenga making that argument.
All right, that's a good point. And in our part two, we could go into a little bit more detail about that point about Abdallah, Professor Abdallah, and Sir Sonoran correcting the conversation, and then how Obenga came afterwards to skip over what Sonoran said. And by the way, Dr. Theophile Obenga holds Sir Sonoran in very, very, very high regards. There's a recent video where Obenga calls Sonoran probably the most, I'm paraphrasing, the one of the most prolific persons dealing with the Egyptian language to date. So, you know, and we could check that out. So he holds this person in high regard, and this person corrected the conversation, but Obenga didn't address it. He went back to the conversation prior to that little bit of the conversation, and we're going to go into that in part two. But for now, we're just showing the problems of this entire conversation from the get-go. And remember, when you're on a trajectory, if you start off at a wrong angle, you're never going to hit your target. And so what we're doing, we're focusing on this beginning fundamental stage of Beatty's presentation, because he's off, and therefore any trajectory he travels on is also going to be off. And so I hope everyone gets that, despite what others may feel and you know, be emotional about, or wherever the case is. But let's go ahead and finish. We got 2 minutes. I'm gonna let it play, and then we get some commentary. Hopefully we'll have time to take a few questions from the chat.
Brother Reggie gave a text from the pyramid text, and this text is actually from the text of the pyramid of Pepi I. And the line is here. His transcription is in the second line there. Aha ek Km.t Kemet happy, and then peace. Next slide.
Okay, so just to give some a point of reference, let me go back to this slide here. And I want to show that what Dr. Beatty just showed is what I have here on the screen. Okay, but he's showing it from a handwritten version that is online, that, you know, you could take a screenshot from and whatnot. And what I did, I reproduced the glyphs here, gave a transliteration and translation for each of these 3 lines. Okay, so this is what Dr. Beatty just showed. All right, and so and this is what he's talking about, where it says aha ek, which is you will stand, and then Km.t, which means before, Kemet-t, the inhabitants of Kemet. And this particular Kemet is talking about Kemet Weret, which is Athribis, and then Hapu is, which is as Apis. Okay, and I want everybody to understand that, because remember what he said about Kemet-t before, and now we're going to let it play, and you're going to see what he says now. So let me get that back over there and play it.
This is James Allen's translation of this. You shall stand at the four of the dual flagpole shrines as men. You shall stand at the four of those of Black land as the Apis. That is, that Allen is translating, because Allen is translating that as a Nesby adjective, and it's proper. That's what you see there.
So you hear him just said that Allen's translation is proper, because let me go back. Let me go back to show you all the glyph here. This glyph he's talking about here is Kemet-t. Okay, and for those who are familiar with the glyphs and the Gardner codes to how to find them, this is the G4 buzzard glyph, which stands for TU. So we have Kemet-t. And so he says it's proper to translate it as a Nisbi, because this is what it is, a Nisbi. And by the way, for those who get this text, you all will get a very brief crash course on Nisbi adjectives, which are relational adjectives. And this is how in Egyptian we form demonyms. And so this is all explained in this text. All right. So make sure you get this text that came out yesterday. But here Dr. Beatty says that Km.t is translated properly as those who are inhabiting or the inhabitants of Ethribis or a place. Okay. Now, so I just wanted to point that out, that that's what he's referring to. Okay. So let me go back and let him continue to speak.
But it's an interesting parallel here in terms of what you see, because as Reggie said, there's a couple of points that Reggie's making very strong here. But as Reggie said, the Apis bull is not just a sacred bull, but it's a black bull. Yep. So when you see here, those of the black land as Apis, it's actually an emphasis on the fact that it's black. But the interesting thing is that with Pepi the First, we're in the 6th dynasty, and this is kind of what I want to talk about today, that we're in the 6th dynasty. The reference by Ogden Golay, which I'm coming to in a minute, in terms of the historical reference, this implies, Kemet implies a Kemet.
All right, let's stop here. So I think we're going to stop here, and this is where we're going to end for this segment. So I want to point out that it is Dr. Mario Beatty's contention that because this word Kemet exists in the pyramid text, that this implies a Kemet, just as he said. He said the word Kemet implies that there's a Kemet. And he keeps bringing up a scholar by the name of Ogden Golay. Ogden Golay did an article examining the place name Kemet through its non-literary and literary text. And he's the one that shows and demonstrates when Kemet as a place name was first used for the entire nation, which is at the 11th dynasty under the rule of Mentuhotep the second. So this is who he's referring to. And again, we're going to go more in detail in our part 2, but this is what he's referring to. So this is confirmation of what Asar said, that our beloved brother, Dr. Mario Beatty, is not up on and ignorant of the scholarship on the place called Ethribis, Wudjau Iry-Maat, and how that particular place was a part of a larger settlement within the same area called Kemet. So this Kemet is not talking about the kingdom of Kemet as a whole. It's talking about a place, Kemet. All right, that's why it in the pyramid text. Okay, so we have to understand that this Kemet is referring to the inhabitants of this particular place, not the entire kingdom. So you had something to add to that?
No, other than that, that this whole area, there's lots of things named Kim that have nothing to do with black. And so there's like a Kemet Serapeum, it's a temple. There's another one called Per Kim. None of them have to deal with black. It has something to do with us. Of course, you have Kimwer, which is a lake. It's not a black lake, and it's not a bull lake. It has to deal with water itself. It's just a great lake. That's all it is. Like we say the Great Lakes in Central Africa, if in ancient Egypt, they would have called it Kimwer. The Kimwer region, as we would say. And so that's why I showed earlier the citation from Jean Leconte, who was also at the Cairo Symposium, and how his analysis, him and some other scholars, looked at all the pyramid texts of Pepi I. So this is what Dr. Beatty is referring to right here. So what he's talking about, we just got confirmation from the other scholars who examined these pyramid texts that the Kemet and Km.t in the pyramid text of Pepi I is referring to what we now call Ethribis.
Yes, and modern days,
and not the nation.
Exactly.
I'm sorry.
I was saying in modern times, people refer to it in some other scholarly work as El Atrib, as more as an Arabic name now today. So I want to back up just a second though, because I want to tease out his logic here. And I want to show why this logic is used. It's used as a cover. And let me back up a little bit, because what he says, and I'm gonna say it first and I'll play it. What he says is that the reason he said what is interesting to him is that this quote where it says, "You shall stand at the four of the dual flagpole shrines as men. You shall stand at the four of those of the black land as Apis." What he's emphasizing here is that because the Apis bull he's implying that it's black, and so there's a comparison and that he's calling an emphasis on blackness. Now I'm going to say that he completely made that up. All right, because here's the logic. I'm going to let it play first, and I'm going to show the logic.
Is not just a sacred bull, but it's a black bull. Yep. So when you see here, those of the black land as Apis, it's actually an emphasis on the fact that it's black.
Okay, y'all just heard him. He said, when you see those of the black land as Apis, it's an emphasis on the fact that it's black. The black land on the emphasis that it's black, et cetera, et cetera. So now, if we were to take that logic, and I'm going to show you a couple of the sentences around that particular sentence here. If we take that logic, the sentence right before that, it says aha ek, which is you stand, talking about you, talking about the person again. You stand before Km.t at the fore or before senut. All right, which is a word, a dual word for the shrines that were dedicated to men. It says as men. So if now look at the wording, you will stand before, you will stand before, you will stand before what? Those of Athribis, before what? The shrines. As what? Men, and here as Apis. So if this is an emphasis on black, then what is this an emphasis of? Shrines as men. What is the point or the emphasis being made here? As men. And then also another sentence, you will stand in a wide lake as Sokar. So what is the emphasis here? As Sokar. You see, so the logic is not fitting for the context or the text in which we are, dealing with right here. So you have to reach and make up the fact that this is talking about some kind of emphasis on the fact that it's black, as if the skin color of the people was some kind of high priority of the people, as if like how we use it today. And we could get into that another time as well. So, I just wanted to kind of emphasize these things. And I think that's a good place where we can kind of stop it. In part two, we could pick up from here. So I don't know where you want to go from here.
No, I mean this is fine. Again, we're going to be addressing this in a total of 3 videos, I guess 3.5 videos, given the technical difficulties. Hopefully this will be worked out, and we can go without a glitch for the next conversation, which will keep you up to date. But it just goes to show that when you carefully analyze, there's a reason why Reggie and ASCAC set it up to where you couldn't ask questions in the saying from the audience, you couldn't rebuttal, because they wouldn't have been allowed to get away with that. It would have been shown that they were basically ill prepared for this conversation. And as evidenced by Reggie's commentary in the chat, that he just will never get it. And so it's a comprehension issue. And he's all over the place, and you'll just be running around in circles, in terms of, saying the arguments that he makes. And so, again, both of them were off topic. It's a linguistic question, and they should have came with linguistic answers to the question and even understood. And it's clear that Dr. Mario Beatty doesn't understand the nature of the question, the research question that's being asked. So again, everything that we, have stated here, it is in our book, and that is just a preliminary. I have a full article on the meaning of the place name Kemet coming out in my upcoming book. And then we're doing a book dedicated. we're doing a book dedicated to the word Kemet, and so it's going to have, you know, some other, you know, saying scholars contributing to the chapters, and so it's going to be a good book, and so, you know, be on the lookout for that sometime in the near future. And otherwise, our good brother Wudjau is working on the grammar book, and I'm working on Wudjau Volume 2. So more than likely, those will come out first, and then, you know, the focus will be on the Kemet book. And so I'm also be writing a journal article, and I'm submitting it to a linguistic Egyptologist journal. And so, you know, we'll see how it fares out, you know, saying then. But I wanted to have these larger texts out first, because journal articles, you only have so much space, and this requires a lot more space than what is normally allowed for journal articles. So just keeping that in mind. But that's all I have for now.
Okay, so I want to just end, you know, as far as this, before we take some questions on the stress of logical fallacies. And hopefully, I know it's small print, so apologize for the small print. So I'm just going to read two of these, because these are probably the two most popular that you see in our community, you know, our discussions and things like that. And one is called a straw man. And I did a whole video on logical fallacies. And I know getting trained in debating and being on a debating team in college, logical fallacies was something that we had to memorize. We had to memorize them, one, to recognize when someone else is doing them, and then two, we had to memorize them in order to show that we can do them as well. And by us doing them, we know that we can recognize them when someone else to do these, and the consequences of these logical fallacies. But anyway, for the straw man, what is a straw man? A straw man is when there is a misrepresentation of someone's argument to make it easier to attack. And this is the top left-hand corner, by the way. It says, then here's an example. After Will said that we should put more money into health and education, Warren responded by saying that he was surprised that Will hates our country so much that he wants to leave it defenseless by cutting military spending. Am I broken up? Am I coming in broken up? Okay, just as a precaution, let me exit and come right back in. If y'all can hear me, I'm gonna leave and come right back. So because I'm not sure if I'm broken up. Let me just make sure this is known. All right, so let me leave and come right back. Or maybe somebody in the chat can let me know. Somebody in the chat, if you can type in the chat that do I sound broken up? Okay, I think it's Asar. So Asar, I think they're saying it's you. So whatever you got going on, because I'm hearing a lot of noise here. So all right, so aside from that, let me. Okay, there we are. So hopefully everybody can hear me fine. All right, so where was I? Okay, straw man. All right, here we are, back on track. So again, the straw man, the example is after Will said that we should put more money into health and education, Warren responded by saying that he was surprised that Will hates our country so much that he wants to leave it defenseless by cutting military spending. Okay, so that's an example of straw man. And that's what's going on here in this discussion that we are witnessing. But again, this is not a debate. So, you know, it's in and out. It's like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And it's what I call a pseudo debate. And this is the dangers of having pseudo debates. Okay. So the other one I want to read is called Appeal to Authority, which is here towards the middle. So what is appealing to authority? Because now on the streets and in our regular everyday conversation, this is called name dropping. And you're going to see a lot of this. People drop names as if that is going to help them win an argument. And if I want you to notice that this is what the brother Reggie does a lot. as a matter of fact, this is a screenshot of Reggie's comment. And notice that he says, Beatty is supported by Dr. Raketi Amen, Cambone, Mfundishi, myself, and Neterneb. The fundamental error is that the Sumerian has not been reconstructed and transliteration are not sounds unless confirmed by Coptic, et cetera, et cetera. But I just want to take note that even before that, he says, this would be an epic criticism of Diop, Obenga, Clark, Ben Yochanan, Carruthers, and Koringa, collectively the old guard led by Beatty. Dr. Beatty himself will not respond further to this debate. So I want you to notice the name dropping. Okay, now we call this name dropping, but really what it is in a more technical terms, for those who actually do debates, it's appealing to authority. All right. Not even citing their arguments. So it's like a halfway appeal to authority. But what is appeal to authority? Appeal to authority is using the opinion or position of an authority figure or institution of authority in place of an actual argument. And so here's an example. Not able to defend his position that evolution isn't true, Bob says that he knows a scientist who also questions evolution and presumably isn't a primate. And so that's just an example. So when people can't defend the arguments, they use or they appeal to authorities, name drop, to kind of fill in where they are handicapped and lacking. And so this goes back to what Asar says, that this kind of work has to be done. And so the idea about Kemet and Km.t and how Km.t implies a Kemet back in the Old Kingdom during the pyramid text and whatnot, it's a simple matter of Dr. Mario Beatty, and I say this with respect and love, that he simply is ignorant of the information. All right. And there's a lot of information and a lot of data, and we are presenting it. Okay. So I want everybody to understand that we can explain why. We can explain what Kemet means. We can explain why it was used by the people at the time it was used. Okay. And we're going to do that in written format in our upcoming future book. But this text that just came out yesterday is a collection of essays for it's like a prelude that corresponds or complements the ASCAC conference. All right. As Asar said before, I was unable to attend in person, but I gave my contribution in the form of an essay to this particular text. All right. So Asar, I don't know how you want to handle questions. You want to just kind of just mark now people type their questions, or are you going to invite people to come in, or what?
No, they can type a question. So we'll end it soon to keep it under. It's already almost 1 o'clock in the morning here, at least East Coast.
All right. So anybody that has a question, now is the time to type your question. We'll take a few, and I'm gonna apologize beforehand that we won't be able to get to everybody's question if we're just bombarded with questions at this point for time's sake. But go ahead and type a few questions, and maybe we can address it. And keep in mind that we will have a part 2 and part 3. So if you ask a question that we already know we're gonna talk about in the upcoming parts, we're just gonna let you know that. All right. So let's go ahead and get to it. So I know there's a delay from when we as we're talking here now to the time you hear it. So we're just gonna fill in fill in some time here. All right. So yeah, so I'm just waiting on some questions, and I just want to, I guess while we're waiting, let me just reiterate something that I always say. As you can see the cover of this text, it says a contribution to the debate on the meaning of the place name Kemet. Place name is synonymous with the word toponym. Toponym, place name, to mean the same thing. Toponym is coming from the Greek, language. Place name is what we simply say, how we translate it in English. And so at all times, we're talking about a place name. And never, ever, ever on the planet Earth will you find a toponym that refers to people. All right. So let me repeat that. There is no toponym on the planet Earth that refers to people. Toponyms, by their very nature of their very existence, refers to places, locations/places. Okay. I went over this several times, and you're going to read about it in this particular text, but I want to reiterate that, buying some time to see if anybody has any questions, and whatnot. But just keep that in mind. Place names never refer to people. They always refer to places. Hence, we call them place names. When a name refers to people, it's called an ethnonym. Ethnonym. All right. So let me just, because I don't see any questions. Let me ask a question to the audience, and you can answer when you hear me ask this question. What did the ancient Egyptians call themselves? What does everybody know that the ancient Egyptians called themselves? In other words, I'm asking you all, what is the endonymic ethnonym of the ancient Egyptians? Meaning, endonymic meaning self-named. What did they call themselves? An ethnonym, endonymic ethnonym. What did the ancient Egyptians call themselves? All right. I see we got two answers. 3. Oh, 2.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess we wind it down. I guess nobody has questions. And see, this is the point where either everybody gets what we're saying, or
I mean, we how many videos have we made on this already? So there's, so they get it. They have our well, hold on, we got one from Zion. So
okay.
I have a question. If Kemet is in fact a toponym, which I agree with, then what exactly is the ancestral name of the people? Is Remetz the sole name? Is there a name that's older than Remetz?
All right, that's
to my knowledge, it is simply Remetz as the ethnonym of the group. And but what you got to understand as well is that I don't know if I should say most, but it is common knowledge among linguists that when people identify themselves in more ancient times, and even to a few in the current day, when they name themselves, they really don't have an elaborate name. It's just a word for person or the people in their language. And so I doubt that they had any real name outside of the people, because that's common amongst human groups, saying across the world. And so that's my answer.
Yeah, I second that answer. Let me get back to my screen. Yeah, the Remich, and we have to keep in mind that the usually, along with what Asar said, usually indigenous populations back in historical and ancient times, remember, writing is very, very young. Writing at the most is about roughly 5,000 years old. In the history of Homo sapiens sapiens, writing is like as if to say it was born yesterday or this morning. So there has to be a way to store knowledge, to pass it on to the next generation. Otherwise, every generation that's born is going to have to start from scratch. Can you imagine you being born and you have to figure out what foods are healthy, what foods are edible and what's poisonous every single generation? So there has to be a transmission of knowledge. And so we have to understand that there was different ingenious devices and ways in which groups of people transmitted knowledge from one generation to the next prior to writing. And so what comes out of that is what we call figurative expressions. You got metaphors, similes, hyperboles, and all this other kind of stuff that we call these things today. And so I'm saying that to say is that what we're calling myths is one of the devices in which societies stored and transmitted knowledge. And I'm saying that because a lot of the people's names of indigenous cultures will be anchored into a myth. And so when we come to the ancient Egyptians, they call themselves the Remech. and it's connected to its cosmogonical or cosmological understanding and text, where they say that humanity, which is them, they come from the secretions or the tears of Ra. And so because the word tear or to cry is Remi, it sounds like the word for people, Remit, and so they connect the two. And so they connected and tie this knot in a myth to explain their origins. Okay, so the word Remech is the ethnonym and is tied to their cosmological or cosmogonical understanding. All right, so we have the Remech, and then most people think that most people are egotistical as a people. They believe that their location is the first of its kind. They themselves is the you know, all that in a bag of chips, and everybody else is just, you know, something else. Like most cultures do that, and so the ancient Egyptians are no different. They consider themselves the people, and everybody else was referred to as cardinal points or something else. All right, and as a matter of fact, just real quick, since we're on the subject, and
we need to wrap up soon.
All right, real quick here. Well, okay, I won't even take more time. I'll just say it. So, in other words, whenever the ancient Egyptians wanted to distinguish themselves from anybody else in the world, their far neighbors and near neighbors, they used the word Remech. And you can find this in the Book of Gates, the 5th division of the Book of Gates, where they have a vignette where they show in 4 groups of 4 people talking about the nation, their neighbors, the closest neighbors. It's them themselves as the Remech. You have the Amu, which is translated as the Asians. You have the Nehesu, which are their southern neighbors, and then you have the Chemehu, which are their western neighbors, called Libyans today. So you have the Asians, the Libyans, and what people call the Nubians, and then the Egyptians themselves. They call themselves the Remech. They did not use the word Kemet or Km.t to make that distinction. Again, I repeat, they did not use the word Kemet or Km.t to make that distinction about themselves. Their ethnonym is Remech. So hopefully that fully answers your question. Who's that? Who's that answer? Ask that.
That was Zion Lex.
Okay, so I don't know if you want to take another one.
Zion Lion. I'll just take this last one from Zion Lex. It's a follow-up. So he says, Remech means humanity. So my question is, how would Remech be the oldest name if it doesn't effectively differentiate them from the rest of humanity? Well, you got to understand that just because they have a word Remech, which means to be human and the person a human being, and technically it's a word for body and to exist. But I deal with that in my upcoming book on the etymology of the word Remech. Other people may have the same word, a word for person in their language around them, but they speak a different language. And so it seems like a different word in their language. And so, you know, it would be distinct by the language itself. But, you know, how they differentiate themselves by language, by culture. And the Egyptians have stated this on numerous occasions, you know, and just in who they are. You know, matter of fact, there's some texts which cites their enemies as people who don't know the Remech, you know, who don't know them, you know, saying personally. And so, you know, it has to deal with culture, their worldview. It's a little bit more than simply a name. The name is just who they are. And that's what it technically means. But they're not differentiating themselves based on their name alone. They're differentiating themselves based on their ancestors, based on their deities, and based on their culture and language. And so that's what we get, you know, throughout the history of ancient Kemet.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, hence the reason why it's an ethnonym. We're talking about ethnicity. And so once we know the ingredients of what makes an ethnic group, then we'll understand that that is contained within a label, which we call a word, and it's denoted in the word. So Remech. is that word. So I guess that's pretty much it. And I want everybody to understand we have it. We're going to do another part of this. And if you have any other questions, we can further, have these discussions in our Facebook group. We are in the Amara Squad Facebook group, as well as the Seshu Mani Medo Netra Facebook group. So this will probably be more so, for that particular group. Join the group. And again, I don't know if my screen is still showing, but make sure that you pick up the text, because we want to engage people in an understanding. So we know that the text obviously just came out yesterday. People are going to have time to get it, read it, digest it. But we want to have this discussion, so people can progress in the information. All right. So we're trying to, our goal is to educate people on this particular topic. All right. And we can't do the microwave thing. So that's all I have.
All righty. Well, I appreciate everyone for listening to us, and those who are listening live and those who are coming back to review. Again, we're having part 2 and part 3, and so we're just going to go and do kind of the same format. We're just going to play Dr. Beatty, and then we're going to respond to his words directly. And a lot of this, has actually been rebutted. I brought the book to the conference. So, this isn't, nothing that we wrote in this text is in response directly to anything said at the conference. So we came to the conference with the book, and the book already addresses and nullifies 95% of their arguments. And that's not even the full argument. It's just, what was necessary for an understanding on this particular discussion. So, I encourage y'all to get the book as a prelude. My argument on Kemet, the full one, is going to be in my upcoming book, Wudjau Volume 2, subtitled Chiena into Religion and Philosophy. And, Brother Wudjau will cover more on toponyms and Nisbe adjectives in his greater work on the grammar. And then we're coming together. We're going to be addressing the whole color issue, the sociology of all this in terms of identity, saying the raw linguistics of the matter, everything. The actual book on Kemet is going to be a more complete argument. And then we can expand into these other areas and other arguments. But for this debate, is strictly on the meaning and etymology, which is a linguistic thing. So I appreciate y'all for sticking with us, even through the technical difficulty. Please share. And, in the demonstration, the description is going to be the link to the book. So the book is titled A Contribution to the Debate on the Meaning of the Place Name Kemet. So you can look that up on Amazon.com right now, and it will show up. And that's all I have for now. Keep your ears to the streets. Thank you for watching. We appreciate you all. Thank you all for the support. And keep the conversation going. All right, y'all. Peace.
Peace.